guys, and welcome back to my channel. We're starting off today not with my face, I know, unusual, but we're jumping right into our pattern making. And we're not constructing our pattern this time ourselves, but we're making a pattern from a already finished garment. So this is a really cool technique that you can use if you are not too much into pattern making, or if you just really like a design of something that you already own but want to, you know, make it yourself in a specific fabric and so on. So as you can see, I already put my garment as flat as I can possibly make it, since it is a 3D object, onto my paper, and I'm tracing out all of the different seams that I can see. I'm using my tracing wheel for that. That's a very handy tool that you need for this. There is a dart from the shoulder, which is kind of difficult to translate into a pattern, but we're gonna work with that in just a second. I am sectioning it off in a way, I guess. I am first of all making sure that all of my shoulder area, the collar, the positions of different seams and whatnot are correct before I move on to the hem of my coat, because that means that I have to switch positions of my garment, and then everything would, you know, not fit together if you didn't fix your positions beforehand. With industrial patterns, you can basically just make a rectangle for the side seam, the center front, and the hem. Because especially nowadays in fashion, everything is pretty straight and androgynous. So you can more or less be sure that that's the pattern for, you know, the lower portion of your coat. The difficult part is actually just getting the upper, so the collar, shoulder seam, and armhole correct. And I am just basically using the traced out lines as guidelines, because you really want to make sure that everything measures correctly. Like, you want to be so meticulous about all of the measurements, and especially since there is a dart in the shoulder area, I kind of just eyed it, to be honest. I think I made the dart like 3 centimeters wide. That seemed to be like a good width, I guess, and then just angled the collar and everything to the left of the dart accordingly, if that makes sense. And everything else, I am just measuring and comparing to my actual garment and making sure that the measurement is the same. If I see a curve or something like that, for example in the shoulder, there is usually a curved shoulder seam with oversized garments like that one, so I am also adding that into my coat. I am fixing the positions of my buttonholes, of my buttons, just measuring everything, and that's it. Now, of course, I'm also doing the same for my back piece. The back piece is also pretty rectangular. The center back and the side seams seem to be parallel, but my problem with this was that I started the wrong way, I guess. So I started with my armhole, which was not the best idea, because that just did not leave me with any like anchor point, I guess, which I used my center back for in the end. So I just put my weights, or like my tape that I use as weights, onto my center back and fixed that position into place, and then worked my way down accordingly. So I tried my best to trace out my armhole, my shoulders, and stuff like that. This was really hard. I managed somehow in the end, also not just because I just compared a bunch of stuff and measured everything as much as possible, but also because I already like somewhat know how a piece should look like, I guess from experience as well. So if I don't have, you know, the perfect traced out lines, I somewhat can make it work just from already knowing how the piece should end up looking like from experience. But if you have problems with that, I always recommend to either do simpler garments, because, you know, a coat is a very advanced garment to begin with. So start with a jersey dress or a t-shirt, something like that, so you get an idea of how this technique works, and then just gradually go to more advanced garments, and at some point just have the experience that you need to do anything that you'd like to do. As you can see, and since I just explained it, it's not the easiest thing to do for a coat pattern. I always like to just make my coats from scratch instead of taking a pattern from a already existing garment. So I get it if you are like, no thanks, I don't want to do that, it looks like a hassle. So I digitized my pattern and you can get it with the link down below. So that's the status quo at the moment. I put the coat together apart from the sleeves, so that's not done yet. But I put the color in, and as you can see, it like does a weird fold here. So there is something not correct with the color. And I also have an idea. Since there is a color band right there, it kind of, you know, tucks it to the side. So there is not enough fabric in this width right here. So I think I need to make the collar band a tiny bit bigger, like wider, maybe like 5 millimeter, if even. And then also a tiny bit longer, because I had troubles putting it in to my collar right here. And then also into the neck cutout of my coat itself. So that's something that I have to adjust. Other than that, the color looks really, really nice. It makes a really nice shape. It is very tight to the neck, which it should be. It doesn't fold anywhere at all. Like, it just makes a really, really nice shape, as it should. And this is the only thing that doesn't work out quite yet. And then I'll put the sleeves on and see how the fit generally is. And then I can finally like put it on myself and see how it fits there. And then also, of course, I have to take into consideration that this is not thick fabric. This is just my mock-up fabric, which is on the thinner side. So this is what the coat looks like at the moment. As you can see right here, this side is pretty nice and flat, whereas here is exactly what I said before. This is tucking and pulling to this side. That means because I started sewing the collar band in from this side, there was not enough space to sew in right here, not enough length of the collar band, which is why I had to ease it in a bit, which is bad, which just means that the collar band was not long enough, so like 5 millimeters more, and this should look exactly the same as this side, which is what we want. And then apart from that, I think this looks really nice, especially with the fabric that I want to work with, which is this. So it's a really big pattern, which I think also needs a big coat and like big space to do its job, more or less. So I'm really excited to use this fabric. It has like this kind of furry texture, which I think will work really, really nicely on this pattern here. So I'm just gonna fix the collar band and then do all of the small pieces, and I'll see you then. By the way, if you're interested in all of the small bits and pieces that go into making a coat, I can recommend you this video right here where I'm going more into detail. And apart from that video, I also made a booklet that is about all the small bits and pieces that you need to know in order to construct the perfect coat or jacket. And I'll leave a link down in the description below so you can go ahead and check it out on my Etsy shop. I am explaining basically everything you need to know in order to construct a coat and all of the small steps in between that I learned in university. So go ahead and check it out if you're interested. So I actually recorded me making the rest of the pattern, so the lining and the facing and stuff. And I was talking while doing that and explaining a whole bunch of stuff, but I just can't fit it into this video. It would be way too long. It's like 30 minutes of me just explaining how this works. So I cut it out of this video, but if you're interested in it, and I know that a lot of people are interested in how to make the inner workings of a coat, you can go ahead and click on the link in the eye, because I actually uploaded this progress on my YouTube channel as like a private video. So if you're interested, you can go ahead and check that out. It's not really edited or anything, it's just purely me screen recording and explaining what I'm doing. But go ahead and check it out if you're interested. So as per usual with my patterns, also excuse my voice, it left me the other day, so sorry about that. But as per usual with my patterns, you just need to print it out at a 100% scale and then just tape page to page, not cutting anything away, not overlapping anything, just edge to edge. Please also check the control square on page 1. It must measure 5 centimeters and 1 inch. If it doesn't do that, you need to redo your printer settings because the pattern will come out not in the correct size. So only after that's checked, you can go ahead and cut your individual pattern pieces out of your fabric. For this project, I already said it before, I'm using this beautiful fabric. And since it is a pattern on, like in my weave, basically, I need to make sure that the weave is completely symmetrical on either side. That's why I'm putting needles into my selvage right there, just to match up both sides, basically that the pattern is on both sides the same, so that once I am cutting it out, it has the same pattern at the same locations of my pattern pieces. Another thing that I wanted to mention, since my fabric has a direction, and therefore you want to make sure that you cut out your pattern pieces always facing the same direction. So in my case, that the hairs stick down. That's just a small thing for me specifically, but if you're working with something similar, you also need to watch out for that. Also, a small backstory, I guess. I planned this video weeks ago. Like, I knew already that I wanted to upload this video today. And for some reason, since it was such a sure thing, I completely forgot to like check my interfacing and my stock of fabrics, I guess. So I ended up having no interfacing anymore, which is why you saw me like using my scraps basically. But anyways, I had new stock coming in today, so I'm completely fine. Fully stocked again. Hell yeah. I am flashing on screen right now the interfacing guide that you can actually also find in my ultimate guide for jackets and coats. I just screenshotted this out of my guide. That is where you need to place your interfacing, where you need to iron your interfacing onto your different pattern pieces. So on the back piece, for example, you see that only the upper portion gets interfacing. Same goes to the sleeves. Only the upper portion, not the full sleeve. And then of course also the hem facing, which is in the pattern itself. So you don't have a different pattern piece for your hem facing, you just fold it up because it's easier and because we have a square hem. So that is where you put interfacing as well. And then also of course the other gray areas that you saw. And then there are a few spots where you put interfacing tape, but those are marked on the screenshot and then also on the pattern itself. Hello! It's Saturday. I don't have a voice. I'm very sorry. But we're gonna start sewing today. Let's hope that it's gonna be a one-day sewing project or maybe 2. I'm still waiting on my lining to come in, so if I won't receive the package today, that's not gonna happen. At least the outer shell we can do. So let's start with the pockets because that's what you would always start with. Let's go. So to prepare the pockets, you want to overlock the longer side of the pocket facing just like that. Since you have 4 pockets, you're just going to take 2 of them and place the pocket facing just on top of that. They should just fit right here. So these are basically, as the name already says, facings for the pockets so that the black fabric or whatever your pocket fabric is won't show in the coat when you use your pockets, when you put your hands into your pocket. So you're gonna just sew them on to one of the pockets. So just like that. So you might notice that these 2 are not the same. That's because I'm using scrap pieces for this. So these will be kind of invisible anyway, so it doesn't matter. Just make sure that the hairs don't go, in the opposite side so that you won't have any troubles reaching into the pocket itself. So I have my front piece right here. I want to copy out the position of my pockets. Make sure that it's 90 degrees everywhere. It's 18 times 5 centimeters, so make sure to get the measurements correct. What we're gonna do now is basically draw seam allowance to the inside of this piece on all 4 sides. And now we only want to cut away the inside We're going to cut towards the edges. And now we can use this right here as seam allowance for our pocket flap. We are going to place the open side onto the hole that we just made. This should end 1 centimeter before the pocket flap ends, because in the pocket flap there is also seam allowance. So we want to place this exactly 1 centimeter in, and here the same thing on the other side, like this, and this should align perfectly now, because these two are now the same length. And now we can go ahead and sew the pocket flap onto the front piece. It should look something like this, and you want to just iron the seam nicely. Make sure to go in the direction of the fabric. Now, I probably should have tried to match up the pattern a bit better, but, well, it is what it is, first of all. And second of all, I think it's a cute pattern on the flap itself, so I'm fine with this. The next thing that you want to do is use the smaller sides, like the upper and lower side, and also pin this to the flap. So this is gonna be like a tedious work, but the outcome is gonna be amazing, so take your time for this. And it's gonna be exactly the same as for this, apart from the edge right here should end where the fold is, because here is no seam allowance since it's folded. And now we're gonna sew here and here. Okay, so this is what it should end up looking like. And you want to give this a good iron, just to make sure everything lays correctly and nicely. Okay, and now it's time to put the pockets in place. I don't know how far you are in the pocket game, but there is a seam allowance open still here, which is obviously going to be used to put the pocket on. But where's the other one for the other side? Well, the other one is right here, the width of your pocket facing more towards the inside of your piece, which means that your pockets have to be a different width. This right here with the facing will be attached to this seam allowance right there. And then this piece right here will have to be attached right here. So you see that there is too much fabric that can't be used. So what we're gonna do first is to put this piece right there. You're gonna have to match up the seam allowances again, as with the facing as well. So this is the beautiful pocket that you should end up with. Now you want to give this another iron, of course, and then we can put the other pocket without the facing into place. You want to align the pockets and then basically just work your way towards the seam allowance here. So these basically will align like this, which means that you can now sew the pocket onto this seam allowance right here. And once that is in, it should align with the other pocket really nicely. And you can peel the piece back in this direction, and then we'll also need the bottom side up so that this right here is visible, because this also needs to be attached to the pocket itself. So we're gonna sew a small corner into this here. So we're using all of the seam allowances of our flap to fix the pockets into place. And what we actually can do is cutting away the seam allowance of the lower pocket flap, because then we can cut here and this peels open, so we can use the seam allowance to sew the two pockets together as well. It's like that, and we're just gonna sew here and all around, and then we're gonna do the same thing up here. Peel the piece back so that the seam allowances are visible, and then pin everything together so we can sew everything together right here. And that's the whole pocket. Now that the pockets are done, we can go ahead and put the coat together. Well, actually before we do that, we need to close the dart in the front piece. I forgot about that as of right now. I will remember in just a second. But close the front dart and then we can continue putting everything together. So once the darts are closed, we're taking our front and our back pieces and closing the shoulder seam. Now this works more or less the same as for any other garment, at least I am using the same technique and the same order of things. So I'm always closing my shoulder seam first, then I'm also ironing my shoulder seam allowance into the back piece, because generally the seam of the back piece is like 1 centimeter longer than the front piece, and you like ease them together, so it just makes a really nice shape. And once that's done, you want to grab your sleeve pieces. You have a upper and a lower sleeve piece, and they're divided by a sleeve dividing seam, so you want to close that and leave the side seam open. Now the technique that I am using and showing you here only works if you have one continuous side seam throughout your sleeves and your body pieces. If you don't have that, you need to close the side seam of your sleeves, or the front dividing seam of your sleeve. You need to close the side seam of your body piece and then put the sleeve into the closed armhole. But since I made the pattern to fit what I like, I of course left the side seam in, and it is continuous, so we can do my method that I'm showing on screen here. So align the sleeve with the sleeve cut out. Make sure that the dividing line in your sleeve faces towards the back piece, because that just indicates the back and the front of the sleeve. And then you can go ahead and pin the sleeve in. Make sure to match up your shoulder notch with your shoulder seam, and also the front sleeve point and the back sleeve point, which is the dividing seam. Make sure to match all of that up and sew it in place. And once you're done with that, you want to iron your seam allowance into the sleeve. And only then we are going to close our side seam from the sleeve hem all the way down to our coat hem, which is, in my opinion, the easiest and the fastest and the best way to go by this. But to each their own. If you're happy using the other method that I explained before, you sure can do that as well. This is just my preferred method. And also, as per usual, you want to iron the side seam allowance towards the back piece, also in your sleeves, by the way. And just like that, the body of your coat is already done. Now let's move on to the collar. You want to take the smaller one, which is also the one with the diagonal arrow that indicates the grain line. So take that one, and then also the inner collar band. Both of those are the inner collar pieces. Also make sure that you match up the correct side with your collar. The inner collar band has 3 notches on one side and only 1 notch on the other side. That's the one that you need to pin together with your collar. The one with 3 notches has shoulder notches included, which are to be attached to the neck cutout of your coat body. Once the collar band is in place, I am top stitching the seam allowance into the collar band and then reinforcing the collar band with straight top stitches parallel to each other all the way down. That just makes a nicer stand, I guess. The collar in general just looks nicer in the coat. So that's something that you can do if you want to. In a lot of coats you can actually find that as well. Maybe you have one like that at home as well. Most of the times it's also made from a different fabric, like a thicker fabric as well, which is just giving the coat a bit more structure. Now, pinning the collar onto the coat body can be a bit tricky. Like start from the center back and work your way towards the start of the collar, where the edge is, towards the collar edge, and match up your shoulder notches with your shoulder seam, and everything should be fine. But once you reach your gorge line, which is the seam, it's indicated in the pattern, but it's basically that small seam where the lapel and the collar are sewn together. So that means that you have to turn a corner with your pattern pieces, and that can be a bit tricky because you need to cut towards your seam and you need to make room for the pattern pieces to go there. So you basically just saw me cut towards the stitching line right where the dart meets, which makes it, on top of, you know, it already being tricky, just a tiny bit more tricky, just because there is more volume and more layers to it. But you need to cut towards the edge and then you can turn the corner. You might also need to cut a bit away from the seam allowance of the dart, just because it's just so much easier to handle the coat. And then you can continue to match up the notch that indicates where the collar band goes, and then of course also the gorge line, where the gorge line ends basically into the collar notch. I'm starting to sew at the collar notch, which is indicated in the pattern, and working my way over the gorge line to the dart point. Now there is a lot going on, but since you cut towards the stitching line at the dart point, you can just easily turn the corner while like putting everything that you don't need, any seam allowance, out of the way. You can see it here again. I'm just turning the corner and trying to make everything just be out of the way, and then stitch towards the collar notch again. And this is what it looks like. It's so pretty with the top stitches in the collar band. I'm really happy about this. The last step before we end this video is gonna be ironing the seam allowance of the neck cutout into the collar band. How I am doing that basically, because there is a specific way. So the first thing is I would like to cut towards the stitching line of where my collar band meets the collar, and then I'm also cutting away the edge at the dart point. The next thing is that I am cutting towards the stitching line at the notch point, because then I can open the gorge line up. The rest of the collar band, like the sides of the collar band, we're just going to ignore because they're too stiff and too small in order to actually force them into the collar. So let's just leave them. But the rest, so the neck cutout basically, we are going to iron it towards the collar band. You always, in any garment, want to iron all of your seam allowances towards the collar. And on top of that, if you have a collar band like I have right here, you want to iron all of your seam allowances into the collar band, because you want to give it as much strength as you possibly can, because that's why it's here in the first place, you know? So that's it for today's video. At least we're going to leave it at the 30-minute mark as per usual. In the next 2 weeks, give or take, let's say, we're going to finish this coat. I am still waiting on my lining to come in because I might have ordered the wrong thing. Actually, no, they said it was something that it isn't, but whatever. So I need to order another lining, which will come in next week. So I'm waiting on that. But apart from that, I am already super excited to announce that the coat is coming together right here. I finished the facing and stuff like that already, so that's why it looks a bit better than on the video. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. It's good to be back after a week off. So I'm back finally, and I can't wait to see your reactions, your opinions in the comments down below. So go ahead and do that, as well as giving this video a like if you liked it. Interaction like that just really helps me out. Also subscribing to my channel, of course. So if you like what you saw, go and interact with this video. It would help me out so much, so thank you so much. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe, ring the bell as well, so you'll get notified anytime that I post. I post on Sundays, so you can keep an eye out for that. And if you're interested, go and check out all of the other videos on my channel, as I am doing a lot of stuff, all sewing related, fashion design, and of course pattern construction. So I'll see you in another video for sure. If you haven't already, go and follow me on my socials. The handle is exactly the same as here on my YouTube. I am posting a lot of behind the scenes content and just like stuff from my life, I guess, on my Instagram, for example, so go ahead and follow me there. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching again, and I'm gonna see you next Sunday. Bye, guys. Oh, wait. I have another live class on the 13th of November, which you should definitely check out. I am making, actually there are two classes. I am making the elastic dress block and also the elastic sleeve block. So if you're interested in that, links are down in the description below, and you should definitely go and check it out. Okay, now I'm done. Bye, guys! Learn how to make basic garment blocks, how to manipulate them for your individual measurements and design, and how your body measurements translate into patterns. Get access to hands-on classes with 10 to 15 students max for individual teaching, room for all your questions, and personalized class topics taught by me, a graduated fashion designer and garment constructor. Learn alongside an enthusiastic community to chat about anything design related in the dedicated community space. Understand the methods behind garment construction and use them for your own designs and creativity. And all in all, let's just have a lot of fun designing and creating our dream clothes. So go ahead and check it out and start creating now.